Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular town council meeting for Tuesday, August 21st, 2018. Please rise for a moment of silence. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Fishbein.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Letourneau.
Here.
Marone. Morgenstein. Shortell.
Here.
Testa.
Here.
Zandri. And Chairman Cervoni.
Here. Councilor Marone did have a work obligation. Councilor Morgenstein, I believe, is away babysitting. And Councilor Zandri did tell me that he is on his way and we anticipate him shortly. With that, on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve or accept consent agenda items A through AA.
Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda passes. On to item 4. There are no items removed from the consent agenda. And on to item 5, the public question and answer period. Mr. Morgenstein, who is not babysitting.
Larry Morgenstein, South Main Street. Through the chair to the mayor, please.
Go ahead.
Tonight the PUC is meeting, and I noticed on their agenda they're going into executive session to talk about CMAQ. And a few weeks ago there was an article in the paper where CMAQ made the claim that when it all is said and done there would only be a payment of $1.8 million. Where does Wallingford stand right now on that?
The parties haven't reached any finalization. I'm not sure what CMEX's overall position is, but the $1.8 million reflects money that they feel is owed from the past. It would not address prospective issues about how billing is calculated and matters of that kind into the future. So there are no final figures at this point.
And do we have any time frame yet for final decision and final cost? Or
I don't believe there is a time frame because at times the arbitrator asks for more information. He's requested information from the two parties, CMEC and Wallingford. They're in the process of providing that information to him. And at that point, he will receive that information, whether he will have additional questions, whether additional steps. I don't think anyone knows. The Corporation Counsel beside me agrees that there's no way to know the answer to that.
And given that CMEC has made this claim with a certain amount, are you disputing that or have any statement as such that you believe there'll be claims beyond that?
Claims beyond what?
In terms of a recovery for Wallingford?
Beyond?
The 1.8 million.
Well, as I just stated, that's not a final figure, and it only applies to a time frame that is already passed by. So that's past damages. I don't believe we necessarily agree with that, but that's all in the hands of our attorneys and in information that will be supplied to the arbitrator.
So again, you're saying that you folks have no idea of when this will be settled at this point?
At this point, I think it's very difficult to anticipate when it would be. My guess is it will not be, I'm not even going to guess. I've been wrong too many times with regard to the arbitration.
And at this point, will there be any more legal fees incurred as this, we're waiting?
Well, our attorneys are working for the town in order to provide information requested by the arbitrator, so certainly they're entitled to be paid for the time they spend working.
So as the clock ticks, we're still paying out legal fees?
As long as our attorneys are working, we will be paying them. They won't do it for free.
Thank you.
Mr. Gross.
Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. Just to follow up on that through the chair to the mayor, then at some point, I think the town's into legal fees, correct me if I'm wrong, about 2.8 million at this point, somewhere in that range?
I believe the 1.8 million was a figure CMEC advanced with regard to settlement of some of the claims.
No, I'm talking legal fees.
I'm not sure what that figure is now.
No, the reason I say that is if the town decides to dispute or go on with the arbitrators and so forth, or if there's more stuff going on, at some point, you've seen what the arbitrator has already given in resolution up to this point. At some point, hopefully the council won't approve, or the Public Utilities Commission will say, hey, the recovery might not be there, we're done. I hope that they will look at that, because at this point, but the townspeople have paid out more money in legal fees than the recovery at this particular point in time.
But-
At this particular point in time.
No, that is not a final figure of recovery. That's
I understand.
a dollar figure suggested by CMEC that is not in agreement with our dollar figure. We haven't agreed to it. That's a number that is part of what is still being discussed and negotiated, information that is going to the arbitrator. So it's not a final figure.
All right, then maybe I'm misunderstanding. Hasn't the arbiter, hasn't he or she ruled already up to a particular point in time?
Not with respect to any dollar figure that I'm aware of.
I'm just remembering there was some numbers in the paper, and so I don't remember where the numbers were from, but it just becomes a money pit at some particular point in time. If you can't or feel you can't recover, at some point you have to say uncle and walk away. Thank you.
I agree with that.
Anyone else? All right. With that, we'll close the public question and answer period, and I'm actually going to jump to item number 7, which is discussion and possible action regarding a tentative agreement for local 130360, Council for American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, the Wallingford Custodians contract. I believe we have representatives from the Board of Ed. Good evening, welcome back.
Good evening, thank you for having us. So tonight we're bringing before you the custodian's contract for the Board of Education, and I'll give you a little bit of the factual information about it.
If you could just remind us who you are for the record, that would be great.
Certainly, I could do that. I'm Cindy Lavalette, the Assistant Superintendent for Personnel, and I'd actually like to introduce, while I'm here seated, is Danielle Belizzi, who will be the incoming Assistant Superintendent for Personnel. This will be my last contract that I bring before the Town Council.
Well, thank you for your service to the town.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right. This contract is a contract with a 3-year duration, effective July 1st, 2018, so it is retroactive right now, and its final date then would be June 30th, 2021. It has a wage increase in the first year of a general wage increase of 1.75, a general wage increase in the second year of 2.0, and a general wage increase in the third year of 1.85. One thing that seems like a small thing, but was very important to us on the board side, was this union is among the first to agree to biweekly wages effective July 1st, 2019. So that will really help begin to manage things as we try and move more and more unions in that direction in the business office. So it's one of the big pushes of the board to just run in a more lean, according to a lean philosophy, and making more with what we have. Another thing that is a win that we've been working on consistently over the years is the waiver. So currently through grandfathering and sunsetting things out, there are only 3 union members who are on the waiver. The waiver amount will reduce in the third year by another $500. And in addition to it now being sunset for new employees, it is also sunset for any current employees. If you aren't currently on the waiver, you never will be. The insurance is currently still the PPO, and at the start of the next fiscal year, it will be moving to the HSA. But in the meantime, we are going to get some savings in this current year with an increase in deductibles for both office visits, outpatient services, and inpatient hospitalization, plus an increase in the premium cost share. So over the life of the contract, the premium cost share for singles is going up 2%, and it's going up 3% for two-party and family. Things that we did give on the other side is that the accidental death and life insurance is increasing slightly. The wage differential when a custodian is asked to work in a classification above their current classification when somebody else is out for whatever reason, they do get a wage differential after a week. So it's decreasing from a week down to getting that wage differential to after 3 days, and there's a 10 cents per hour increase in that wage differential. Clothing allowance is slightly increased, and bereavement language now is going to include step-parent and step-child. One of the other things that was not part of this negotiation, but it's something that consistently comes up at the town council when I bring the contracts forward, is the language regarding paying an agency fee if you elect not to be a union member. And there was recently a decision, the Janus decision, that no longer allows that. So we realized that that is not legal. It is still within this contract because we were past the point of being able to make proposals, but we are in conversations to change that language, and we are in compliance with the law. We are not paying agency fees, or we're not deducting agency fees for any employee. So I did just want to bring that up because I know it's typically a question of interest to the council.
Thank you very much. Questions from the council? Questions from the public? Okay, and if there is no action by the council, this will pass or become effective on the 30th day after it was it delivered to us? When does that clock start?
I'm going to have to double check because right, I don't want to misspeak.
Correct.
But in either event, no action from the council tonight will result in this contract going into effect.
Yes, that's correct.
There's nothing further from the council. We will move on. Thank you for your time and for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Back to item 6, which is to conduct a public hearing and consider an act on the new code of ethics. All right, this has come out of the ordinance committee, and between Councilor Shortell and Attorney Small, we can perhaps get some summary of what we've done. This was brought before us as a result of the charter change. Am I correct, Attorney Small?
Yes.
So this is the council's new code of ethics. If this is a public hearing, if there are questions or comments from the public, I'd encourage you to come forward. Mr. Gross.
Yes, I was going to raise my hand. Nobody else seemed to be interested.
Well, you raised your whole self, and I acknowledge that.
It's more than my hand. It's a tough thing to do. I'm getting old. What? We all are. That's a good thing. On here, is there a place in here where it's going to be required that there is training involved for members of the council or the community, the workers?
Not specifically in the ordinance. I mean, that's something that can be done, but it's not a requirement of the ordinance. I mean, normally, if you're going to, I would think that something like that would be more appropriately, I was thinking of something else, I'm sorry. No, it's not. Not specifically in the ordinance. Doesn't mean it can't be done, though.
Well, it wouldn't be done in the ordinance now then, because this is going to be probably approved tonight.
I'm sorry?
So it wouldn't be done something put into an ordinance tonight, and you probably, because it's pretty much done.
I don't think that's what she said.
Oh.
I think
I thought you,
what she said was that the training can occur even
it
though.
could occur, right,
Oh,
it doesn't
yeah.
have to be in the ordinance, right?
No, but it was, and that's the word, can occur. It would be nice to see training on some type of schedule for people in town. I mean, the council changes people over the years, town employees change over the years, and as we're seeing today in courts all across this country, there are lapses in people's judgments. And it's good to, you like that one, huh?
It's an interesting choice of words.
It is. Well, they made a choice.
Yeah.
And, because on some of these, in here it talks about direct, financial reward or something of that nature, which is quite obvious to most people. But it's the indirect that's the questionable one. So if somebody sits on a board of something and somebody comes in front of the council or PUC or any of these other panels and they might belong to that organization or they might have a tie somehow, that's an indirect. And that needs to be explained, I think, better than, that's why it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that can be, the personnel department does a variety of training. That's something I certainly could talk to them about. And, public officials would be invited to that. That's something we can definitely look at. It's not a bad idea.
Because I think the last time the councils had training would go back 10 years or more. Ethics, you've had newer ethics training than that?
We had an ethics presentation that I attended, I think last year. Well, no, it wasn't mandatory, but we were all invited.
Yeah, well, I'm saying an invitation's different than requesting that you go to something so you have an idea of what indirect is, direct, because...
I can't require elected
No,
officials
yeah.
to go to something.
Well, you could if it was in an ordinance, or you could if it was required of them. That's the whole thing, and I think this was said before, so I would just, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from the public? Then I bring it back to the council. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I join in the position that training should be in here. I mean, it should say something like, within 30 days of assuming a position or being sworn in, there shall be some sort of ethics something. Because we ran into this about 8 years ago, and I said that we were appointing people to boards and commissions. They didn't know what the charter was, they didn't know what the ordinances were. In some cases, they didn't know the law of their particular body, and it's my understanding that we've gotten away from that again. So, I think guidance. But going through what's before us, Janice, you put together a memo dated August 14. It's a one paragraph. It says, attached is a revision to paragraph of the proposed ordinance. It does not change the meaning, but rather clarifies it. I just wanted to go through that first. The term, the clause, entity closely associated, where is that defined?
It isn't.
Okay, and it's one of the things that we talked about in committee that I think the Ethics Committee has had problems dealing with direct or indirect, or what is, that business association. So now we've created a term, entity, whatever that is, because it's not, doesn't say business entity, so I don't know what it is. An entity closely associated to the person. So we're leaving it up, it appears, to the ethics committee to figure out what that is, and it's our job to give them guidance. So
It could be business or otherwise. I mean, nobody, I wasn't told to put a definition in that. I mean, nobody raised it as an issue, so, but, I mean, an entity could be a business entity, could be a nonprofit entity, could be, I mean, you want me to define the word entity?
No, but it's the whole clause, entity closely related. So if it's a nonprofit, do you volunteer there on Saturdays? Are you on the board? Are you, I mean, that's from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, which could impact on ethics, because that's been one of the issues, in my opinion, the Ethics Committee has had, is that indirect thing. Where do we get? So that's the first thing. Looking at the next sentence, and just reading that, an indirect interest also exists if the official or employee has a conflict of duty. Shouldn't that be when? It still leaves the question.
Does it change the meaning to change it from
It's a little bit more forceful, it's a little bit more direct. It jumped off the page at me, and, so those are my comments with regard to that portion. Looking at page 2 of the body of the ordinance, in the first line, personal value, it says any interest, direct or indirect, which is of financial or personal value to the official. What is that? Because I don't think that's defined either.
That becomes a judgment call as to whether or not something is sufficient to essentially create an interest on your part.
But who?
I mean, I don't, that's what we have a Board of Ethics for.
Well, no,
I'm not
it's
sure
not.
how you want me to define that, and I don't understand why you didn't say this while we were working this in the workshop.
Well, I was not at the meeting.
Well, you were at the meeting when we discussed these paragraphs. This paragraph is unchanged from the previous ordinance. In fact, I reported to the council that I thought that this language actually was fairly good. Unless you told me otherwise, I was going to leave that paragraph alone. So.
Well, I thought that, I didn't realize that this was only going to have 2 workshops and essentially and get voted. I mean, there's many.
I think we had
pages.
more than 2, didn't we?
No, we had 2.
Seems like it.
I was at the one, and then the second one, I believe it was July 10th. I was not here. And
Well, I was asked to say something about indirect interest, and that's how I created that second paragraph.
Okay, so it's our job to create the law and for the Ethics Committee to apply the law as we create it. We are the legislative body. So one must believe that a personal value is different from a financial value because it says financial or personal value.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that is. I mean,
Well,
we also,
if you do something for the direct interest of your child and it doesn't apply to the community at large, whether it involves finances or another, somebody could say that you have an interest of personal value. I mean, does that not fall into that category? I mean, I don't know, we can't have an ethics ordinance which gives definition to every single thing. There'd be no point in having a Board of Ethics. I also had a conversation with the council. This ordinance could be 10, 20 pages long if you wanted to list every scenario. I gave you that option too. So how would you suggest you define personal value? Or do you wish to take it out? How do you wish to do that?
I don't know what the intent of the body that created that, nor this body is with regard to that. This is really the first that we're discussing that.
That's not true. We discussed that definition.
Well, personal value?
We discussed the definition of interest.
Yes, and
The council directed me to look at it. I looked at it. I said, unless you tell me specifically what you're looking for, I actually think it's a pretty good paragraph from the original ordinance. The second directive I got was to elaborate on indirect interest. And that's what I reported back. I don't believe you were at that meeting, but that's what I reported back. So I don't know, what is it, what would you say instead of personal value?
I'm thinking of something that's like an in-kind contribution or donation, you know.
Well, generally, an in-kind contribution is usually equated with some equivalent monetary value. I mean, personal is personal.
Understood. And that's why as a group, you know, I wanted to have this discussion.
That's fine.
And, you know, then I moved down to the relations by marriage.
Yeah, I didn't touch that section from the previous ordinance.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this, like, the entire thing because it's before us now to, you know, accept or reject or table, I guess. And the thought that went through my mind was, I understand current spouse, but why is it just a current spouse? You know, I mean, wouldn't the same perception of possible impropriety result with potentially with a former spouse or something like that? I mean,
I think the purpose of this section, which, as I said, was in the original ordinance, is that those are your obvious current relationships. Whether or not someone else that you may have previously had a relationship with could fall into a different category, but these are very specifically to say who you're related to. I mean, I think that this is pretty standard definition of your relations. But I didn't touch it from the last one. And
Yeah, no,
I
I
didn't
know.
compare it to other, and nothing struck me as being out. I think you would really be talking about your current aspect of it, which doesn't mean that if you have a relationship with someone, a former spouse, whether that couldn't in fact fall into a different category. I think that's a possibility.
because it's not only your current spouse, but it's their blood relatives that this extends to. So
Yeah.
it's more than just, and then something that I particularly brought up, 20-7, I guess at the last meeting, it was decided not to touch this because I expressly brought up the situation
Yes.
of, so,
And I did not find, I did look at that, and I did not find any way, in my opinion, to say that, how you could possibly say that you could practice on behalf of someone in front of a town agency. I did look at numerous sources and did not find any that provided for that, to the best of my recollection. I had no way that I thought I could make that work. I didn't think I could come up with that.
well, there is a way, because you could make it no appointed official.
So,
Very easily.
no appointed official
Shall knowingly render,
should,
yeah, so that would.
or so an elected official could do that.
Yes. And I'm just, you know, there's a restraint of trade issue here, potentially. Elected official sits differently than an appointed official, so that could be an easy fix. But I don't want to step on the toes of my fellow counselors who obviously decided not to change that.
I don't view it as a restraint of trade. I view it as a conflict of interest and possible difficulty with the loyalty of being in the office. But, I did look at it. I just don't see how I would write that. So you would have to say how that, if that would be up to the council.
So an appraiser who sits on planning and zoning would not be able to render services in a tax assessment case. Although they have nothing to do with appointing the individual on the tax assessment case. And
Well, this talks about providing services to another person
yes,
in connection with a proceeding before a town agency.
Board of Assessment Appeals is a town agency. So an appraiser is hired by a resident.
Or by a resident.
Yes. And wants to present that appraisal to the Board of Assessments to challenge the town. And that appraiser happens to sit on planning and zoning.
Yeah, I would think that would be improper under this.
Under this. I mean, I don't think it's right, but if that's what this body feels is appropriate. So then I was just trying to think of a scenario on page 4. No official or employee shall solicit or negotiate, this is C up top, solicit or negotiate for or promise to accept future employment in a manner which is incompatible with his or her official duties and the discharge thereof. I just couldn't, I understand the cautionary aspect, but I couldn't think of a scenario where that could possibly happen.
Well, so if I worked for Wallingford and Cheshire, and Wallingford decided they wanted to take over Cheshire, would say that I couldn't do that.
Well, everyone.
You know, if you work for two communities and there is a possibility they could be on opposite side of a substantial statewide issue or something like that. To be in a position where in one town you're advocating for, in the other town you're advocating against, I think that's kind of what I'm talking about there.
Okay, that's fair. The removal situation. I thought that the charter and the code of ethics couldn't deal with removal of an elected official. Wasn't that part of what was dealt with in charter? Not that
Which section are you?
B, I guess. Any violation of the town charter and or this code of ethics was demonstrated to have occurred with the forethought and deliberate intent of the official or employee involved shall be cause for the initiation of removal proceedings. Not that I agree or disagree or whatever with the concept of removing of an elected official. I thought we learned through charter that that was illegal.
We're talking about appointed.
Well, are we?
Yeah.
Where does it?
Hold on, I'm looking at my edited version here. Hold on. Yeah, it says appointed official. We took out the elected. And for an appointed official, it would be referred to the appointing agency or the department head, depending on who it was.
So the clause being at the end is really, it should be sort of at the beginning, and that's how you're reading it?
Does it not read
In
right?
accordance with the town charter, in the case of an appointed official, or in the case of an employee, or referral to the department head? So you're saying because it doesn't deal expressly with elected officials that it's good?
Right, right, yeah,
Okay.
we took out, yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
Now, the investigation by the board section in 5. I mean, I have some familiarity with this at the state level, and this appears to try to mirror a portion of that. But I think the intent is that one that thinks that there's an ethics violation complains. They put some sort of correspondence together saying this is what we claim.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the complaint, correct?
Well, Okay, I'm not sure I'm following you. I mean, if someone files a complaint or on the complaint of the board, so, I mean, if somebody files a complaint, are you talking about giving the complaint to the respondent?
Yeah, and in here, where does it call for the respondent being able to respond, other than at the hearing? Because there's a probable cause determination here.
Right.
So it's sort of like an ex parte application with no response by the accused.
Well, that they participate in the probable cause hearing.
Well, but before you get to the hearing,
Yeah.
the condition precedent is that the board could determine probable cause. So in their determining of probable cause, all they're looking at, the way I read this, is the complaint.
No, that's not the
So
case.
can you just show me where
Hold
it
on.
says that?
Hold on. The first step is to see if the complaint itself, so essentially on all, four squares of the complaint, it alleges sufficient facts, which if they were all true, would constitute a violation. I'm on, hold on a second,
Because I'm sort of in one paragraph.
I'm down to 3.
Okay, so how do we get to, because one deals with upon a properly prepared written complaint.
Right. Okay, but one is not it just says the board shall have the power to investigate. You got to read the whole thing. So you have the power to investigate. The board then, in paragraph 2, reviews the complaint to determine whether or not, if the allegations as written were proven, would it constitute a violation of anything? If the answer is no, they stop right there and dismiss it. If the answer is yes, then they go forward with an investigation to determine if there is probable cause. In the investigation, they can interview witnesses, they can request documents.
But you're already past, a finding has been made.
No, it has not. We haven't,
No, because in 2, the board shall review the complaint to determine whether or not the allegations, if proven, would constitute a violation of any provision
right,
of
that's
the
not the
contract.
probable cause finding. That would be a determination, essentially, that you haven't stated a complaint of an actual violation, so it doesn't go any further than that.
Okay.
That's not the investigation itself. So let's say, it just says nothing. It says nothing about there being a violation of anything. Councilman Fishbein said the sky was blue and it was really orange. Okay, so they say, well, if this were true, is it a violation of anything? Would it be a violation? If the answer is no, it stops right there. If the answer is yes, that would be a violation of something, it goes on to conduct the probable cause investigation. The probable cause investigation is a determination that there's enough evidence of what's been alleged to warrant the then public hearing.
And that's in paragraph 3. And where in paragraph 3 does it say that the respondent has a right to respond?
All right, hold on a second. At the investigative stage, it doesn't specifically say that the respondent would do something. It's an investigation by the board, so you're correct. It does not say that.
And there's 2
I
different...
certainly contemplated that, if the board wanted information from the respondent, that they would get it at that stage. I mean, this language includes that, but it does not have a specific statement that the respondent can take any action during the probable cause phase.
Now, under this language, are there 2 different kinds of complaints? There's a complaint created by the complainor. Is there also the complaint created by the commission itself based upon their investigation? I can't ferret that out. The state has that process, but I can't get that from this. It seems to say because the board's being given the power to investigate and to interview people,
Right.
but are they bound by the complaint of the complainer, or can they do their own thing?
Well, later it does talk about them being able to amend the complaint, but that's after the probable cause stage.
Yeah, so, and before we get there, it also says in 3, the board may also obtain assistance in its investigation as deemed necessary, provided it has funding for the same. And I think we budget $300 a year for the Ethics Commission. There's
Right.
no way that an Ethics Commission, you know, maybe an ethics complaint is made against us, we're the ones that appropriates money, and we don't want it to happen, whatever. But
Well, they're no different than any other board or department. They have to have, they can't spend money that they don't have. So, you know, certainly, although they don't receive substantial funding at the time, then they would, I mean, it's meant to be in there so that it's clear that they have to go get the funding.
And just to protect the public, ethics, all of that stuff, I would totally change that. And, you know.
Say what? I mean, I could have left it out, it wouldn't change the rules
I mean,
under the
just
charter.
thinking outside the box, that they shall have up to, just thinking outside the box, $5,000 without approval by, you know, the government, doesn't need to be budgeted for, but shall come out of contingency. I don't know. I don't want to hamstring the ethics committee,
Well, I don't think they should be, but I don't, you know,
but it clearly says that they can
I-
only hire people if they have.
right, because
Funding for the
there's
state.
no one who has an exemption from that, but, you know, certainly that would be something that the council can deal with at budget time, is actually put some money into a fund. I mean, the idea that I'd write the ordinance to be that they can violate the charter, I mean, I can't do that by ordinance, so I'm just trying to, I mean, you can certainly deal with that, but I understand the concern entirely, I do. You know, I think well, I'm not sure how else to deal with it other than you deal with it at budget time. And if they have a specific investigation that they're doing and they need funds, if the council were inclined to fund them no monies, then, you know, they may actually have some legal remedy against that,
And
but,
I don't want to have to go down that road, because then
Right,
an action has to be filed and all that stuff.
right.
So I just, you know, it's a thought. So then looking at 4, you know, usually a complaint is kept confidential. And if
Right.
the complainor releases it, it's dismissed. You know, no questions asked, it's draconian, it's dismissed. This doesn't call for that.
Oh.
This says, this gives discretion of the board to not dismiss the
Correct.
complaint. And I don't like that. I mean, the whole reason is that investigations can occur without people being muddied in the newspaper. I've never seen this, that there's discretion to dismiss. So I've got.
You know, I don't recall running what I ran into or didn't run into, but in terms of doing all my research,
So I've got a significant problem with that. Because anybody can complain about anything, but hearings on the complaint shall be recorded. Who pays for that? That's in
now-
3, it's capital E3.
Well, I believe that would be the board.
Well, is it?
There's nothing in here that says that the complainant or the respondent has to pay for it. And it is a public hearing, by the way. We're now in the public hearing, so just like that's recorded, it would be recorded.
Okay, I just have a few more. Subpoena of witnesses, who pays?
That would be the board.
No, well, it shouldn't be.
Why shouldn't, if the
Why-
board subpoena someone, where are you? Where are you? The board may subpoena witnesses. Why wouldn't the board pay, if the board chooses to subpoena witnesses?
Okay,
I'm subpoenaing somebody against you and you want me to make you pay for it?
no, that's fine.
Okay.
But do parties have the right to subpoena their own witnesses? I've had this argument because some state agencies, their rules say that you need permission to subpoena,
Right, some administrative agencies
Yeah,
do
and this is,
that.
this is
Well,
essentially administrative
but,
agency.
you know, I did have, if you have an attorney that really takes you into you're entitled to, that administrative rule doesn't work if you're represented by a lawyer. I did do some work
Did you?
on that. Yeah,
I had this
I can't recall what it was about, but I think I was going to try to object to somebody who did that under those rules, and I don't think it was going to work.
Okay, and the last thing I had is 4-183.
Where are you? What?
It's not in here. So there are no appellate rights? So usually you go to the Superior Court if you're
You
found.
can only go to the Superior Court if the state law gives you that option. You cannot create an appeal to court through an ordinance or even a charter. That's not legal. So people go to court, they don't take it as an appeal, they actually bring an action on that. And it's been done in many towns, some of them gone on for quite some time. So you only have a right to appeal to court if there's a statute that says you can. And that was something that the charter could not give could not give a person, and you can't do it by ordinance either. I'm right about that.
Are you sure? I mean.
Yes, I am right about that. And
Because I've
there have
seen
been
that.
many cases where there's been some pretty big ethical battles in towns where the Board of Ethics has had full hearings. Some of them, I don't know if it's Weathersfield, they had a case that went on for I think a couple of years, and it ended up in court where the person, claimed that, I don't know what their actual claim was, but it's not an appeal, it's an action. Usually, I think actually against the board itself, frankly, if I remember correctly.
So should we be putting something in here like that?
To say what?
Well, that would be a procedural step. I don't even know what kind of action that would be.
No, I would not put that in there.
So.
It's not something that you can dictate. It's not something, you can't by ordinance give somebody the right to do that. If I have the right to sue you in court, I have the right to sue you in court. But nothing you saying about that in an ordinance will have any legal effect, one way or the other.
I've seen this.
You may have seen other charters and ordinances that say you have a right to appeal. We've had other different types of ordinances giving you the right to appeal to the Superior Court. There's no legal authority for it unless the state law says you can. Check it out.
No, I'm going to, because it's rare. I can't think of any other instance where one would not have some remedy.
You do. You can go to court.
Yeah, but
It's just not an appeal.
Not to belabor this, but what
Well,
is
you have to
that?
pass a law.
What is that action? What?
I don't know. I can look. I don't recall what specifically I think there was one down in Fairfield County too that went to court.
Does that fall under the mandamus?
Well, no, that's what I was.
I don't think it was a mandamus. I think it was.
Because a mandamus would be, you'd be asking government to do something. Here you would be
No, I think it
asking
was
them not
somebody
to do
who
something.
lost, who the board ruled against, said they'd found a violation. I don't know, I can find out, I don't recall.
I'd be interested to know. So, those are generally my concerns with what's before us. So, if we go to a vote tonight, I would be voting opposed. I think it does need some more work. I don't know how my fellow counselors feel about what's before us. I'd certainly entertain or make a motion to table if that's where we want to go with this. So, I defer.
Counselor Shortell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick points. I don't want to give the impression to the public that we've somehow rushed through this. We initially got a draft of this on February 2nd or 3rd in anticipation of our February 6th Ordinance Committee meeting. So we've been kicking this around for 6.5 months. I'm fine tabling it too. If you feel it needs more work, I too want to hear what the rest of the council thinks. I don't know that there's urgency to get it done tonight, but I just want to make it clear, we did have, again, discussion on February 6th, discussion on June 5th, discussion on July 10th. So this is not something that we're rushing through. And I also want to commend Attorney Small for her work on this. She's come back to us with multiple iterations of this. In fact, the latest one that we received had revisions in it based on a member of the public who wrote to us, and she made some revisions based on that. So I feel like she's been very responsive to this as well. I mean, I think the bottom line is, how specific do you get? Can we outline every single scenario? Does this go far enough? And is it clear for a council 20 years from now who didn't create it what these rules are? So I'm open to I want to get it right. So I'm fine tabling it. I defer also to the other councilors. The only other point I would make is in response to Mr. Gross's, one of his comments during the public hearing. He talked about mandatory training, and I think that is appropriate. My suggestion for that would be, I think we should include that in our town council rules. We have rules that govern how we conduct our meetings and different things like that, and that's something that I will put on a future agenda. I think we'll be opening up those rules anyway on some other issues in the near future, so that's something where I would like to address that specific request there, because I think that's a great point. I think some kind of training, not just on ethics, but we did have FOI training a year or two ago as well, but I think that type of training is important, especially as the council changes over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else from the council? Councilor Fishbein.
Given what Councilor Shortell, Chairman of the Ordinance Committee, had to say, I make a motion, if we feel appropriate, to refer it back to ordinance. So moved.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
I only counted one nay, so I presume that was 6.
I voted late, aye.
Okay.
No, yes.
No, he's for it.
No, there's only one no, so that means there were 6 in favor by my math. So that matter is going back to the committee. And we are on to item 8, which is discussion and possible action with regard to changing the name of High Street in Yalesville to Patricia Giuliano Drive. Councilor Fishbein, this is your item.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I think it was a little over a year ago, Councilor Shortell and I were going door to door on High Street in Yalesville, and we spoke to a resident who had expressed her frustration for many years. Medical things, deliveries, things like that. And from there, we inquired a little bit further, and we had presented an agenda item to change the name of High Street to High Road. At that time, the discussion that we had was generally that that name was not different enough. There was a recognition up here, I think, that maybe something needed to get done. From there, the mayor dispatched the chief of police to have his staff go door to door or in some way contact residents on High Street as to their feelings on changing it. I've been waiting an awful long time to learn of those efforts, because I know there's people out there that are having some difficulties. So while I was thinking about it, Pat Giuliano passed, and Pat was very instrumental in my life. I was a teacher for a very long time at Sheehan, and her passing was very sudden. And looking for a name, I felt it to be appropriate. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about this. I got a call today. Unfortunately, the individual didn't leave a number, so I could call them back. A person claiming that they live on High Street, and that if the name changed, that they were going to have to change their mortgage and their deed and all this stuff, and that's just not true. We're just looking to get some resolution here. I don't know whoever decided to name, we have a Church Street, we have a William Street, we have all these different streets that are duplicative. around town, and I certainly didn't do it. But, you know, it's back here so we can have our discussion and see if maybe we can get some help for some people, or talk about a procedure. You know, I would prefer to have the majority of the people, if this is to happen, you know, agree, you know, we have a little election, whatever, because the majority rules. But I know there's problems. Not everybody is shared in those problems. You know, maybe people don't order as much as other people. But you know, when I'm hearing that somebody's you know, ordering oil in Yalesville and it's getting delivered High Street in proper Wallingford, that's a problem. And when I'm hearing that, you know, go to get your driveway plowed and you call somebody and they plow the wrong driveway and you got to get out for your dialysis appointment, that's a problem. So, you know, this is not an intent to hurt anyone. It's to try and solve a problem. So, that's where we are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor.
Yeah, the police department did do the survey, and the result was that a significant number of people were opposed to a change. There's also a suggestion that those who have a duplicate number on High Street in Wallingford, that the number be changed. People did not want to change their number. So that's why basically nothing has happened. I mean, I would suggest that if we're talking about changing the name of a street, we really do need to let the people on the street know and find out what the feelings are. There is a capability of just changing the number of an individual residence, but obviously that person would have to change their address at the appropriate times and places in order to make sure that they, the people who correspond with them, supply them with information or anything else, are aware of the new number. But a survey was done, there was effort to contact, and a significant number of people were opposed to a complete change of name. We can do that again.
Mayor, of all the people sitting in this room, I think you're the one who's been here the longest. I seem to recall, maybe in the last decade, that there was a council discussion about selecting the name of a road, and I think it was possibly a new development. And the developer wanted to name the road after a family member, and the council was bound to some list. Is that gone by the wayside, or?
At one time, a list of names was suggested. The list was brought to the council. The list was approved, but as time went on, there were continual exceptions and pleas to allow another name, whatever, and it really has fallen by the wayside. We can do that again, but that typically is for circumstances where it's the naming of a new highway. And the result of that episode really was also to inform developers that don't put a name on a street before the council has approved a name. But again, that can be done, but for an existing street with addresses on it, it would require everyone on the street to, again, change their address, unlike a new street where there's no established number of addresses, and it's open to any name that meets the approval of the council.
Thank you. Councilor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I want to just try to clarify that I understand everything correctly. We all acknowledge there's an issue here because we've had residents come to complain about it. Myself personally, living on Lincoln Drive, have experienced it with packages that were destined for my house, ended up on Lincoln Avenue, even though there's no 35 on it. But I'm hearing from the mayor that through an informal survey from the police department that a majority of these people that live on this street now whether they acknowledge the problem or not, don't want to change the name of the street. Is that not what he just told us?
He didn't say a majority, he said a significant amount.
All right, so whenever I hear the term significant amount, I consider that to be more than half. I would deem that the majority.
I don't remember exact numbers. A significant number were opposed to a change. And this goes back maybe a couple of years. I mean, nothing has been done recently with regard to this issue. But several years ago, the issue was brought to our attention and efforts were made, as I just related. But it's not recent, but I believe it was significant numbers. I don't remember if it was a majority or...
Okay, thank you for the clarification, because I mean, I'm more driven to do what the people that are impacted want, whether it's the folks that want to change or don't want to change. I'm good with it either which way, but I don't want to direct the change if it seems like there's not enough people to support it. I think in that case, then the individuals that have problems need to address it, although I do acknowledge the fact that there is a problem with emergency services. So I really think while we ought to entertain this, we ought to take a look at this, we really need input from the residents. We understand that there's already the potential for an issue with respect to emergency services and so forth, but we really have to get that direct input from the residents, because otherwise then we're just forcing a change on them. Perhaps, if it ends up being the majority that don't want it, I don't think that's the right thing to do. That's just my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just a couple of things, but Mayor, I'm a little confused because I thought over the past year, didn't we direct the police department to go do a survey on both high streets?
They did a survey on High Street in Yalesville to determine what people there thought about the issue. The issue was brought up by people on the street, and the results were, as I indicated, including not individuals who were having problems. They didn't want to change the number, not to change the name of the street, just change the number so it wouldn't have a same number as another street. But there was not interest, as I recall, in doing either of those things.
So, but we don't have any definitive numbers on how many houses that an officer went to and...
Oh, yes, we have that. I don't have it here, but
okay.
I would assume the police department still has their records on it.
That would have been good to have tonight, that information.
Well, it doesn't affect us now. This was several years ago, I believe.
No,
So you could have different people living there now.
that's what I was saying. That's where the confusion comes in. It was sooner than a couple of years ago. It was just in the past year that we authorized up here to have that we talked about this.
That's not my recollection, but
Well,
we can find out from the police department.
Going back to the list of names, I had gotten this list from the Planning and Zoning Office, and this goes back to 2004. There were 3 groups. What the council decided on then was a list of street names approved by the town council. Group 1 was founding family names, and there's a whole list of names. Group 2, local Native Americans at the time of the Wallingford founding. In that, there was quite a bit of discussion because basically there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's probably 10 names that nobody could pronounce or spell. So that didn't go far. Group 3 was assorted historic figures and names, and these were basically, there were just some last names, there were first names, last names, but there was quite a bit of discussion on the council on this. And like the mayor said, this was, at that time, there was quite a bit of discussion. And it was basically put in place with the developer would come to the council first before naming a street. And so that's how that list came about. I'm not opposed to a name change for high streets, but this name concerns me because of the length of the name. I think you'd need a signpost up there that'd be about 4 foot long to fit it. And I think maybe we're overthinking this a lot, where we have 2 high streets. We have, now that it got blocked off, there's 2 Hotsford streets, there's 2 William streets, maybe we ought to just make this townwide universal where that happens. If it's one is on the east side, one is on the west side, such as High Street, and we'll leave the other ones alone right now, but High Street and Yalesville High Street here on the east side, that we do East High and West High. You don't have to change the numbers. It could be as simple as you could spell it out, East High Street, West High Street, or E High, or W High. And just kind of bring it down, and I think it would help. You know, it's not a problem maybe so much with packages, it's an inconvenience. But where it becomes a major problem is somebody suffering a heart attack waiting for an ambulance, and it goes to the wrong high street. Then you have a problem. Yeah, it's a serious problem. So I appreciate the conversation on this. I am just not, I understand Councilor Fishbine's passion for bringing this name forward. I just think it's too much of a name. You know, I just equate it to my last name, and you would need a sign that big at the end of the street. I think it's just inappropriate. But my point being, I think we can do it, but simplify it. East High Street, West High Street. And then take other ones as they come up. And again, go to the residents with it and say, this is what we're proposing. Are you okay with it? And if they don't want it and they're not, you know, we'll just let it be until there's a problem. So, I'm good, thank you.
So have you just relieved us of the obligation to name a street after you in your retirement?
You could do it now, it's okay. I'm not retiring, but you could do it now, sure.
I thought you said your name was too long for a street sign.
It is, I could shorten it up.
The linear trail would be the appropriate thing to name after John.
Mayor, did you have something? I thought I saw you waving at me.
I just wanted to, everyone understands if we put an east or a west or anything, it would be a change in address. And so that would require a person to notify, because it's a new address. It's East High Street, it's West High Street. And I think you potentially could have the post office, if it's just High Street, not deliver it, because there is no just High Street. So if you didn't notify all the entities that correspond with you, there could be an issue ultimately with regard to delivery because they don't know which one, so I'll send it back, no known address.
Might be easier to put the east or west after High Street, but still, your point is...
Regardless, I mean, it's a change in the name.
Certainly, certainly. Councilor Laffin.
Thank you. And first I want to say Pat Giuliano was a beautiful and dedicated woman. All this discussion has nothing to do with not voting on this for her. Her dedication as a teacher and for the library in town is, I mean, everybody knows about it. I really see this as a neighborhood decision, just like Councilor Zandri was saying. If the 2 streets want to have a meeting, I have no problem changing the name to whatever they want. I think it's going to be much that the mayor said. I thought the survey was sooner. Maybe we can get those numbers or talking out of the police department. But I think what caused the very problem in the beginning is what's going to happen again. I've always understood that when Yalesville officially merged into Wallingford, that nobody wanted to give up their street name, and so it stuck. And I think that's just going to continue. But if somebody wants to change it, I have no problem with it. I just think the two streets need to have a little, just like they would have a neighborhood watch meeting, get together, talk it out, have a vote. I don't know. But I don't want to impose, unless, there was a huge safety risk and we had the police department, the fire department in here saying that this needs to be done, we need to change this, I just don't see a need for it. I'd rather have it come from the neighborhood, from the street, from the residents. I'm assuming that some of those people are here tonight. Hopefully you can come to the microphone. Please come to the microphone, each of you. Even if it's a quick yes or no. But that would help me, anyway, in deciding what we need to really do to get this resolved. Thanks.
Councilor Testa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe you misunderstood Councilor Letourneau's intentions. I believe he would prefer at some point that there be both an East Letourneau Drive and a West Letourneau Drive. Just want to clarify that. It's something, this is important. If you say we're going to change somebody's street, those of us that aren't involved might think, oh, what's the big deal? You move. Anytime you move, you have to change all your addresses. So it's something you have to do. But to someone who's living on a particular residence, to impose that on them, to me, would require one of two things, if not both. The first would be that it be done at their request. At that point, it's not being imposed. If residents approach us, we're here just to do the technicality. They say, please change the name of our street. We'd like it changed to this. And we go ahead and we okay it, just as we okay new street names. The alternative would be if it was something that was proposed to us from the public safety departments in town, and something that they felt very strongly about, to the point where then you'd have to weigh the pros and cons. Does the importance of that possibly even outweigh residents not being in favor of it? So that's really the only time I could see us imposing it. I have not, unless I missed something, I've not seen or heard of any presentation or plea to us from the public safety departments to do this. I'm certain they may have said, oh, it would make things easier for us, but I don't think it's been requested by any. On the flip side, I was hopeful, or would be hopeful, that I would see just a simple list of all the residents and who's for and who's against. At the very least, I can't make a decision without that. I want to know how they feel. Because if I'm going to be making a decision on this, and it turns out I'm going to make 7 families happy and 4 unhappy, I'm not sure I can do that. I do it every election day, but that's a different story. And as far as the name goes, my thought also is that I think it's fantastic. We want to honor an educator in that way, but it was rather lengthy, and I was thinking if we got to that point, even one name, like Patricia, but that's neither here nor there. I do like the idea of putting a directional component east and west. I think that could work for both sides of town, but that's the last thing. Unless you said to someone, hey, we're going to, change the name of your street, and they're like, oh, great. And then you told them it was, Brussels Sprouts Road, and then they would say, oh, no, we don't like that. But really the name decision has to come after, is it desirable? Is it a reasonable exercise of authority on our part? Are we satisfying residents of Wallingford, or are we upsetting a number of them? So I can't make any decision without knowing, do they want this or do they not? Thank you.
Councilor Shortell.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Councilor Testa just said. I think the key for me is, what is the standard here? Is it 50% plus 1? Because that seems like a pretty low standard. I feel like it has to be overwhelmingly in favor of making the change. We, as Councilor Fishbein said, I was with him that day. We did meet that one resident. She was very passionate about this and told some very disturbing stories about situations where the streets got confused. So that's what prompted all this with Councilor Fishbein. So I applaud him for pursuing it. But again, there's an entire street there, and I just want to be sure that we hear from everybody. And for me, it probably has to be more. I mean, I don't want to put a number on it, but 70 to 80% have to want it at least. I can't go with, just over half want it, so let's do it. I agree with what the other councilors have said. It needs to sort of organically come from the rest of the street too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think everybody on the council has had a first round to speak, and I know Councilor Fishbein, you want to speak again. I'm just wondering if you'd mind if I inquire the public before we come back to you.
I'll be quick.
Then be quick.
As far as the long name, Pat Giuliano was known as Pat Giuliano, so it could easily be shortened to Pat Giuliano. I would have expected the mayor was prepared with numbers here tonight. It was just last October that we dealt with this. It's October 24th, it was on our agenda, and the police were dispatched thereafter. There was 19 houses on the street. 13 residents said they were open to the change, and 5 said they were opposed. So those are the numbers, and that's all I have at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to kind of pair off with what Councilor Turno said, I think the idea of like an east or west is probably a good solution. The only concern that I would have in a scenario like that is you actually end up impacting the people that are on High Street over here, because now you're changing their street too. And then that would force them to have a change of address and bank forms and everything else as well, much to the mayor's point. So I guess, again, in consideration of what we might do up here, we have to think about that as well. If the bigger clamoring is coming from the folks in Yalesville, and if it kind of falls in line to what Councilor Fishbein just said, and to kind of also agree with Councilor Shortell, we got to do a little bit better than 50% plus one. That we impact the street that's kind of making the request. They're the ones that kind of want it. They're the ones that, in this scenario, would be receptive to it, so we're minimizing the change to one set of people. So again, I want to be cautious. I want to be supportive. I want to be cautiously supportive of it, because I think it's the right thing to do if the residents want it. But then even if they are kind of marginally opposed to it or marginally want it, we have to look at the safety and response and security side of it, where we've got emergency services getting confused if there's problems. So I think we have to look at it from the bigger picture perspective as well, to consider all points. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a second comment.
Sure. Councilor Laffin?
Yeah, real quick, sorry, you had the numbers? What were the numbers?
There's 19 homes, 13 were open to the change, 5 opposed.
And these are the numbers from the police station, the one that the police did?
I had spoken to the police in the spring, and I recollect those numbers.
Oh.
And then it was in the article, the Record Journal article last week.
All right.
So when I read that jogged my memory. So, I would have expected, since we had this discussion, we knew the police, that there was some sort of report that came to us.
We could have asked too before putting it on the agenda.
I shouldn't have to wait a year.
I'm not saying you had to wait a year, but it's on the agenda.
I'm not in charge of the police.
We also you had numbers too, and I just, everybody went around talking about wanting the numbers. And then, at least you recollect you have the numbers. That's fine. Anyway, I want to hear what the people have to say.
Councilor Letourneau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to pick up on Councilor Zandri, I only proposed east and west. It could be fine-tuned to, you could leave High Street over here alone and just make, the town could have High Street, and West High Street.
That's where I was kind of going with my
And
comment.
just change that, and that's fine, and then leave the east side alone. Unless there's folks out there from the east side that don't mind, but I'm gonna leave it alone right now because I'd like to hear from the residents. Thank you.
All right. Thanks to the new faces in the council for being patient. So I'd like to hear from members of the public who are here. Ma'am in the back row on the left, and then Mr. Giuliano next.
Good evening.
If you could identify yourself.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna, yeah.
Thanks.
My name is Kristen Crane. I live on Sigmund Drive. I suffer from lupus. Kristen Crane, KRISTINCRANE. And I also, due to the lupus, I suffer from a seizure disorder. And I find myself in a weird place because I totally agree with Mr. Fishbein, which I'm normally a hippie liberal. I have an 11-year-old son. My seizures are now under control, but a couple years ago, after a couple years of being under control, I had a massive grand mal seizure. And my address is Sigmund Drive. We also have Sigmund Circle. So it's not even the same as High Street and High Street. And had they been 2 more minutes later, I would have been dead, and my son would have been an orphan. If people can't get through that discomfort of having a last part of their street name changed to save someone's life, then I have a real question about that. You can see him 2 years later emotional about it. I do everything I should to take care of my disorder. My medications, which I hate. My taxes, which everybody hates, right? And also, come on now. I used to run the shelter before Columbus House took it over. I paid back to this town, even though I didn't grow up in it, because I believe that that's what a person does. So if someone is so hell-bent on keeping High Road instead of High West, I would question, are you okay having a parent or a child die? Because in essence, that 1 minute, that 2 minutes it took them more to get to me would have caused that. This is the first night I begged for a ride here because I can't drive because of seizure disorder. Because as liberal as I am, my life is worth more than your freaking street. And that is all I'm going to say. If you can't reach within yourself and see that, and I agree with going with the majority about the name change, but not about the fact that it should change, because I don't know who named all the streets in this town. I'm sorry, I didn't grow up here. But if you can't get that you just named 2 streets High Street, and you can't be a little more, creative about that, I'll help you. I'll name it Kristen Crane wanted to be a pain in the butt, came to a town council meeting and wanted to change road. I mean, people that follow me on social media know. I'm very rarely in agreement with conservative issues. This one, it's not a conservative issue, it's a human issue. And I just beg you to, it doesn't affect me right now, even though it did take them longer because I was Sigmund Drive and they went on Sigmund Circle. But I just can't imagine what it must be like for someone with a chronic illness to live on High Road or High Road 5 miles across town. This doesn't come down to your taxes or the name you bought a mortgage under. This comes down to safety. And I really think we should look at it that way instead of a selfish way of road or West Road or East Road. And I'm sorry if I sound selfish, but I'm going to be on this issue, which I'm usually not. So Craig, I actually thank you for bringing that up. I thank you for committing to sticking to it. And I just hope that the other residents of Wallingford who really love Wallingford as a town and love Wallingford as a people will stick up for everybody else in this town and say they deserve to be rescued just as fast as you do. Thank you.
Mr. Giuliano?
David
Giuliano, 21 Nathan's Path in Wallingford. I know my wife would be very honored and embarrassed by this proposal, but regardless of that, I've maintained a business in Yalesville for about 40 years, 405 Main Street. And the way we solve the problem may very well work for these folks. After our street address, 405 Main Street, we always put Yalesville in parentheses. And quite honestly, we have not had a problem. I don't know if you've ever tried that on your... And it does seem to clarify it. And if I order something on the phone, 405 Main Street, Yalesville, Wallingford, Connecticut. So, and I'm sure there are other streets that won't work on. But quite possibly as an interim solution for this particular street, High Street, that might help. And this way, no one has to have their driver's license changed or anything. And again, Craig, I'm honored. Thank you. Thank you.
Would anyone else from the public like to speak? Ma'am? If you want to, there you go.
Hi, my name is Judy Odell. I live on 15 High Street in Yalesville, and I've been there for 40 years. I would not like to have the street name changed, please. There are some things that would have to have address changes, like bank accounts, credit cards, the land records if you hold a mortgage, passports, magazines, motor vehicle department. I don't want to go to the motor vehicle department. My electric, gas, and trash pickup. If the name has to be changed, please consider a shorter name, because not many people probably still mail their bills, but I do, and it would be a long name to write on the return address. My husband was a police officer in town for 29 years. He died in 2012, so maybe we could name it Glen Street, Glen Drive, or Glen Road. But I really think that it should not be named after a person. It should be something else other than that. And about the emergency vehicles going to the wrong address, when you live on High Street in Yalesville, you have to be very specific and give a cross street for having deliveries or anything like that. And I just want to say an emergency system is only as good as the information that's in it, and maybe the dispatchers should be told to give a cross street when there are duplicate names in town. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Dorothea Davis. My husband and I live at 41 High Street Extension, so our deed says. The deed reads that High Street in Yalesville is an extension of High Street in Wallingford. We moved into our house in 1970. Our address was 41 High Street Extension. The builder built 5 houses on the street, starting with 33 down to 50. All those homes were called High Street Extension. I've lived there 48 years. I have had no trouble with the emergency services. They've come to my house. I do specify that I live on High Street in Yalesville. We are on the opposite side of town. I've had no trouble with vendors. If they do, they call and say, "Where exactly are you?" I said, "Well, we've looked it up on the GPS." I said, "Yes, we're off of Hill Avenue," and they call us Hill Road, but we aren't. We're High Street. I don't know why they named the street an extension and why they didn't follow through. I don't know if it was from those numbers of 33 to 50 or whether it was from 1 to 50. But we were given the address of 41 High Street Extension. I find this to be a very inconvenient thing, that I would have to go through all my doctors, my medication gets delivered to my home, and I would have to make all these changes, including the deed to my house, motor vehicles, passport, all that. I firmly object to the name change. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Sharon Gummo, and I live at 1 High Street in Yalesville, and I've been there for almost 40 years. And I too have to say we haven't had any problems. I've had to call 911 on a number of occasions, and there's never been a problem. And it would be very, very inconvenient to change the name. We also have a small home-based business that we run out of the home. We have a lot of business contacts. I hold a professional license. I'd have to contact the state of Connecticut. And it's just a lot of changes. And if this change were to go through, it does take time for the GPS to make their changes. And for some of our elderly people on the street who have Peapod that comes, that could be a big problem for them as well. When you have an oil company, they get to know you. After 1 or 2 deliveries, they know who you are. They know which high street you're at. And the same goes for anyone else that has to come in and deliver. I'm very specific on where I live, and it's what side of town, and I tell them we're off Route 150 to Hill Avenue to High Street. Very, very simple. So I don't find, I've never had a problem getting any of my deliveries, having my oil delivered. I have someone that comes in on lawn service that takes care of the lawn, told them where we are, no problem. So I am firmly against changing the name. And not only that, I went through and there's quite a number of streets in our town that are duplicates or nearly duplicate. You know, you have William, 3 Williams, 1 without an S, 2 with an S. And I have a whole list of him. Beaumont Avenue and Road, Cedar Lane, Cedar Street. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So it's just not 1 or 2, 3 or 4 streets. There's an awful lot in Wallingford, and I have to give credit to our police department and our EMS. I think they're very sharp and very competent people. And when you call, if you're specific on where you are, there shouldn't be a problem with them arriving. And that's how I feel. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Crane? You might want to wait till you get to the microphone.
I have a loud Long Island and Italian accent, so you might get it way before then. Excuse me for sounding more insensitive than the last comments, but I don't care if your groceries are late. I do care if my son doesn't have a mother. The last amount of comments sickened me, especially after I was the first to speak. I'm the only one that has spoken, I don't know if there's more people here, that are actually affected physically. And as I said before, never thought this come out of my mouth. I thank you, Craig, because this is something that should be debated. I'm sorry that you're going to be inconvenienced for changing your delivery of bread and cheese. I'm not going to apologize for being emotional. That people think that their groceries are more important than someone else's health is pathetic. And yes, I will look directly over there, and I'm sorry your street name might change or might not.
If you could just not make your comments personal, that would be...
How? How do I do that? I don't...
Not personal to people in this room. You can make your point without making your comments personal.
I understand. I'm sorry, but it's a very personal thing, so I'll step away now, hoping that my life and my son having a mother in his life is more important than your groceries. Whoever thinks that. I just think if that's what we become, this is very, very sad.
My name is Jennifer Gunn. I live at 8 High Street in Yalesville. And I have to say, I have had medical emergencies at my home. I have had to have EMS, I have had the fire department, I have had the police department there numerous times in the 15 years that I have been there. I have never not had them show up. I have 4 teenagers, so you can imagine the number of packages that come to my house. And I can count on one hand how many times things have arrived late. It is an inconvenience. We do have a lot of people on the street whose numbers aren't duplicated with the other high street. So maybe the idea of a number change, if there are duplicates, would be the way to handle it. Inconvenience the few that are, affected by this. But as far as medical emergencies, I've never had a problem. And if we're talking about that really being the input, then that would be. And I think, Craig, that you had the numbers wrong. I think it was 8 might have been opposed or in favor of the idea of a change. I was never contacted, and I certainly was never alerted to the fact that you wanted to change this. I found out from a neighbor. So you really should get the input of both streets, both neighborhoods. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm not getting the impression that we're going to take action on this tonight, and perhaps we can hear from the police department at least to see what the results are of their survey and bring this up again. If we could record your question for the record, it'd be great if you could come up to the microphone.
My name is Dorothea Davis. I think it would have been nice if a letter had gone out saying that this meeting was tonight. Not everybody uses Facebook. Not everybody gets the Record Journal. People are on vacation. I think a letter should have been sent out to each homeowner explaining the situation. I know I was contacted by the police. It was probably around election time, 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago. They came door to door. I objected then, so I was one of the ones. But I do think a letter should have been sent out so everyone on the street could have been aware that this meeting was tonight and you were going to discuss this. Because I'm sure there are people who didn't know. I talked to one neighbor and she had no clue, but she was going to be out of town today, so she couldn't come. But I don't think it's up to the neighbors to go door to door. I think it was up to you to send out a letter saying this was going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we're on to item 9.
Move we go into executive session pursuant to section 1-206D of the Connecticut General Statutes with respect to the purchase, sale, and/or leasing of property.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of going into executive session, please say so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the council in executive session, and I would ask the public to kindly clear the council chambers. Thank you. Call the meeting back to order. Is there a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I declare the council back in public session. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we authorize the mayor or his designee to bid at the auction of 33 North Cherry Street as discussed in executive session, and if the successful bidder, to execute the sales agreement with the committee.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Any comments from the public?
Mr. Gross?
Nobody else wants to go. Good evening, Bob Gross, Long Hill Road. Question through the chair to the mayor. Why this property?
The property is next to existing parking. A letter to the council, I don't know if you have the letter I supplied, I've got it here somewhere.
But you're saying it's next to the...
But anyway, the purpose is to provide parking sufficient to encourage the investment in the downtown. We have now a new planning and zoning regulations. We have an incentive housing zone. We have the transit-oriented development projects and proposals. The opportunity is for us to encourage investment in the downtown. From my perspective, a downtown is a very vulnerable place in any community. If there is not investment and care about it, it will deteriorate, and it's much more difficult to make it be a place of vitality and safety and a welcoming influence. So for us, the parking that then becomes available, and I believe we would increase the parking by some 45 or 46 spaces, is of importance. Other things can come of this. I mean, it really provides the raw material, the opportunity for change to occur, but with the space available, it's only limited by your imagination as to what might occur. And our participation in the auction shows that the town is very committed to seeing the community be a place that we can be proud of, and that's why we're doing this.
And I agree with the mayor, but I'm wondering why then, Mr. Mayor, are we going to purchase other properties in the downtown for either parking or for redevelopment to help, as the planning and zoning said the other night, that it would be helpful if the town would purchase other properties in downtown? Was this the start of something good?
Well, we're taking one step at a time. Whether other properties can be purchased is a completely separate issue, and for one reason or another, this is an auction. Certainly other properties have been looked at over the years. The price tags were beyond what we felt was reasonable for the community. This is a public auction, and it's hoped that there can be a reasonable price and the town is able to acquire the property. But certainly price plays a role, and that has played a negative role in other cases.
Because I remember a few years ago, I don't know the exact year, time goes by, there was a piece of property in that same parking lot for sale. And I remember Mr. Gino Zandri coming to the mic and saying and asking the council, and the council said they had to defer to you, about purchasing that building. It was next to the pizza place, that brick building, and you said, what would we use it for? And there was no, this is the foresight that if we had that, then you'd be accumulating properties, and that's why I hope that this is the first step, that you will start to accumulate properties in downtown, put them together, and then you can have the large developers come in and build your vision for a vibrant, well-balanced downtown. Thank you.
It's not my vision, but just let me correct the record here. There were executive sessions devoted to purchasing additional properties in that area. The price tag was way above market value, and it was determined that the town could not meet that kind of price.
That building, somebody could probably look it up, went for $100 and something thousand. That's all that building went for. I know we can't ask you for what this building's going for, but if the initial deposit is $47,000, they normally are looking at 10 times the value.
Maybe we're talking about different locations, but I know
Talking in that same parking lot.
I know for a fact we had an appraisal done. The price requested was well beyond what the appraised price, and it was well above $100,000.
The assessor's in this building, you're in this building, you can go downstairs tomorrow if you really wanted to and check it because it's not online, and you can check it and you could see what that property transferred for, and it was under 200, it was 100 and something $1,000, memory serves right, and it was that building, if you come up from where the shelter is, it's the first building there, it was that brick building, not where the pizza place was, the one before it. And that's something, these are just, and I remember that people were saying at the mic that night that this is something, because we control the parking lot, this is something for the future, and that would have been a thing to own. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to again make sure the record shows there were executive sessions, this was discussed by the council, the requested price was well above what the town was willing to pay.
Any other comments from the public? Mr. Morgenstein?
Good evening, Larry Morgenstein, South Main Street. Again, I think we've all been here, we've talked about the POCD, we've talked about the transit-oriented incentive housing zone. I think it would be a boon for this town to see lower downtown developed. I really see this as a keystone. It could be part of something that could be a start of a future that could be linked to the new train station, the Parker Place development. Again, this could be the start of something. I hope, and could you talk a little bit more about the possibilities? I'd hate to see us acquire this property and that the vision be only parking. I would hope that our vision extends to something beyond just parking.
I think we're pretty open-minded about the possibilities.
Okay.
And when you say something like a keystone, while I think that's a strong word to characterize it, I agree with you that principally that this is a positive action.
Okay, and I won't go beyond that. I think the town should act strongly in trying to do what they can to acquire this. I think it really could be an investment that will go way beyond anything, hopefully, that we'll have to pay for this as a building block. Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Hine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jamie Hine, 342 South Elm. I think it's essential that the town take part in this bidding. You know, that downtown area has been in a pretty sorry state for some time. Our uptown area is thriving, but our downtown area has been struggling, and it's been struggling for years. And you know, that just didn't happen overnight. And the reason why is because all of those parcels down in that area are small parcels. They're small parcels, and so a developer is not going to come in and be interested in purchasing a small parcel because they're not going to make any money on it. You know, a developer is interested in making money, and in order to make money, they have to have a parcel that's big enough to develop, which is why Parker Place is being developed, because that's one of the few large parcels down in that area. And the developer is not going to wait, you know, the 5, 10, 15 years that it's going to take to accumulate enough parcels to be able to make money on. Here, the reason why this particular property makes so much sense is because, as the mayor said, the town owns all the land around it. So this would make perfect sense to purchase. It then gives the town a large parcel to work with, and you know, you could develop a public-private partnership with a developer. You can market it to a developer. The town then has the ability to keep some control over the development of that parcel. The town then sells it to the developer, makes its money back, at least a good portion of the money back, And then the developer develops the property and now you have tax revenue from that. Because I don't think the town is really gaining any revenue from that parcel right now. So, and you can't, I know you guys debated as to what, how much you're gonna authorize the bidding to go up to. Do not let this property go. This is an important parcel to purchase because it then sets up possibly development of that parcel as well as it gets the ball rolling so that maybe other developers come in and start to accumulate some properties and you see some other development down there. It's essential. The town has got to take leadership on this issue, and I commend the mayor for looking into it. Thanks.
I thank you for that, but I think you've got to include all of the council. We've got to include planning and zoning. We've got to include economic development. There are a lot of people involved in this issue. The analyzing of what the possibilities are. So, believe me, it's a lot of people.
Hi, Fran LaFrance Procino, Jackson Avenue. And I'm just saying I agree with the last two speakers that...
Fran, if you could get closer to the mic, thank you.
Sorry. I agree, it's a great piece, and I really would like to see our town take the initiative and scoop it up and really bring that area back to life. It does need some serious infusion of life rather than a parking lot, but I think it's a great idea, and I think some vision would be amazing. And I thank you all for considering it and hope you really go after it. Thank you.
I think that's everybody in the room. All right. If we could call the roll, please.
Thank you. Fishbein.
No.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandri. Yes.
And Chairman Cervoni.
Yes,
The motion passes.
thank you. And we need the motion on the deposit.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve an appropriation of funds in the amount of $47,000 to the Distribution Revenue Fund, number 200, and to the Property Purchase Expense Fund, number 200.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the council. Comments from the public. Madam, sure.
Microphone.
You have to commit.
I'm sorry. Larry Morgenstein, South Main. A quick question about the procedure at the auction. How does the auction work?
It's a live bid.
It's a live bid, so it's open to anybody. It's not closed, a closed bid, whoever is the highest bidder. It just kind of is like a regular auction.
There's a court-appointed auctioneer, and once the bidding starts, typically at noon, it goes until the last bid is bid.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yes.
Ready?
Please call the roll.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fishbein.
Yes.
Laffin.
Yes.
Letourneau.
Yes.
Shortell.
Yes.
Testa.
Yes.
Zandri. Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. There being no further business on the agenda, a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare this meeting adjourned.